Russia invades Ukraine. Brought to you by the History Colonel. The antagonists in this effort are Russia and Belarus versus Ukraine and NATO. To a lesser extent, NATO's involved because they don't actually have a security agreement with Ukraine. As Putin says, NATO has put its frontline forces on our borders. Citing what he claimed were Western promises not to move east of Germany, he states, "We have the right to ask, against whom is the expansion intended?" Whereas on the other side of the coin, Prime Minister Zelensky said in a speech, "I hope the whole world can now clearly see who really wants peace and who has concentrated nearly 100,000 soldiers on our border." In recent history, Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union until 1991. Early on, each nation remained closely aligned, but Ukraine gradually began to distance itself, seeking deeper ties with the West. The current conflict was triggered by the Ukrainian Revolution in 2014, when an uprising overthrew the pro-Russian government, and Russia and Ukraine have been at war ever since. As part of that, Vladimir Putin's forces reacted by annexing the region of Crimea from Ukraine, a move widely condemned by Western nations. Conflict has continued with pro-Russian groups in eastern Ukraine took up arms. Russia backed the separatist forces, which formed a breakaway republic in the Donbas region. Putin then launched military excursions into the region, providing support to the rebels, and Russia continues to hold Crimea, claiming the region joined willingly after they held a staged referendum. 7 years have gone by, and war in Donbas continues, and the loss of life continues as well. The balance of forces are seriously in favor of Russia. They have a million-man army, 13,000 tanks, 4,000 plus aircraft, 600 plus warships, and 6,400 nuclear weapons. Terrain is also on Russia's side, with nice level terrain enabling the movement of motorized and mechanized armor forces into the Ukraine from Russian territory and from Belarus. Also, Russia can attack from land and air routes from Belarus to the north, and Russia can also attack from the east, and from the Black Sea region, they can attack from the sea lanes. The district on the east side of Ukraine is considered the number one military district for the Russians and is resourced accordingly with the 8th Combined Arms Army. Ukraine has 1/4 the size of the Russian army, 2,400 tanks, 285 aircraft, and 25 warships, 0 nuclear weapons, surrounded on 3 sides, and is not a member of NATO. They just aspire to be. So, red check mark for the Ukrainian forces. Government responses around the world have been loud, but not with much material movement in support of Ukraine. The U.S. Defense Secretary says Russian declaration directly undermines Ukraine's sovereignty. The French Foreign Minister says there is no longer any rules for stability and security in Europe. Whereas President Biden of the United States says, who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare a new so-called country in a territory that belongs to his neighbor? Also, the U.S. has moved 8 F-35s and 20 Apache attack helicopters into the region, but honestly, that's more of a defensive move, and it's also a little bit of flag waving, but it really would not deter the Soviet Union. Lastly, China's kind of on the fence, neither supporting nor condemning Russia. The History Colonel is brought to you by a retired soldier with 34 years of service, multiple combat tours, 11 overseas assignments across multiple nations. I've got a master's in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College, a bachelor's in history, and I'm a certified school teacher. Lastly, my references are all open open source references from CNN, Washington Post, New York Post, The Guardian, and the Live UA map. That continues my briefing.